Hello everyone, good morning. I'm Varun. Welcome to part 4 of application demonstrating Spring Boot security with CRUD operations using Spring Boot RESTful API, Hibernate, JPA and MySQL. In my previous demo, I've shown the logic or the code to build the model classes and the interface implementing the JPA repository. In this demo, I will show the code involved in service classes. Basically, these service classes make use of Spring Boot user detail services, authorization, and various other features to authenticate the user with the database credentials. So let's proceed how the code will be in the service classes. Before I go to before I start developing the code in the service classes, I need to add the dependency for Spring Security. And so in the current code, whatever is there, open the pom.xml file and paste this dependency, which is Spring Boot Framework Security, Starter Security. All right, please save it. You can as well do a Maven build for the dependencies to come into effect. You can just do a Maven build. Alright, so build is success. In the console, you can see the build is success. Another thing I would like to highlight is I forgot to mention a method here. So please add this method. Find by user name string username. This we will use in the service classes. So just save it. Alright. Next, let me first define a class called user details service implementation. Okay, click finish. This class basically should implements user details service from Spring Framework. This should implement this interface. Then again you'll get an error. You just say add unimplemented methods. Here, instead of using override, I'll use the transactional read only equals true. Okay, what is transactional? Basically, Spring Framework dynamically creates a proxy and executes this logic. If you want more details about the annotation, I suggest you to go through the documentation of Spring Boot Framework. Alright, next, before I further implement the logic, I need to do further a few things. I need to declare @ service. So what this annotation does, this annotation tells that this class is a Spring Bean of the IOC container. There are 4 annotations provided by the Spring Boot framework: @ component, service, repository, and controller. Whenever these annotations are encountered, it tells that this class is a Spring Bean in the IOC container. Next thing is, I use the annotation auto wired. Okay, now what it tells? This tells the auto wire. Whenever we define a variable as auto wire, then we don't have to define the setter and getter methods. So for this variable user repository, I have defined as auto wired. So this allows me, or this gives me the flexibility that I don't have to define the setter and getter methods. Okay. Next thing is, using this repository, I call the find by my name, find by username. I pass this variable. This returns object of type user. Okay. Import this dependency. Next, I define an object of type set. I'll say granted authority. Okay, space granted authorities equals new hash set. Okay, due to some reason the dependency is not coming up. Let me import this explicitly. Import org.springframework.security.core core dot granted authority. Okay, also import the dependency for set and hash set, which are part of java.util. Okay, now let me define a for loop for role. User dot get roles here dot add. Again we use simple granted authority, to which I pass role dot get name. Okay, this will define at last I have to return new org dot spring framework dot security dot core dot user details dot user I'll say user dot get username, then user dot get password, and finally I'll use granted authorities. Okay, so with this my user detail service implementation is done. I'm basically implementing user detail service, then I'm implementing the method load user by name, which returns the object of type user details. Okay, next I define, let me close these things. I will define an interface called user service. Okay, wherein I define the method void save user and user find by username, to which I'll pass string username. Okay, we should import the user object defined in the model directories. Save it. Next, I define a class name user service implementation. Click finish. This class implements user service. Okay, so please remove this annotations at the rate override. Okay, now in the save, this method is used to this method, because currently in this demo I'm not saving any user ID password, however I'm defining it just for your reference. Set password. Before that, let me define few things. Private user repository. Okay, next I'll define private role repository. Next I define private bcrypt password encoder. Okay, I'll auto wire all of them so that I can directly. Okay, okay, now a password. I'll make use of this dot encode, to which I pass user dot get password. Okay, user dot set roles new hash set role control v dot find all. Okay, put the dependency fix, and last I'll make user repository dot save. Let me see if I defined. Yeah, I'll say dot save, to which I'll pass user. Okay, here I'll say return user repository dot find by username. Okay, so basically I defined two methods here. Save, this is to save the user ID and password. However, we will not be making use of this method anywhere. I'm just defining this for your reference. Using this method, we will find the username stored in the database. Okay, the next thing I'll define is interface security service. New class, sorry, it should be interface. New interface security service. Click finish. Okay, I defined two methods here. String find logged in username and void auto login, to which I pass string username comma string password. Okay, so let me define the class which implements this interface service, uh, sorry, security service implementation. Click finish. This implements security service, then add the unimplemented methods. Please remove this override. Before that, I define a variable called private authentication manager. Okay, Control C. Control V. Also, I'll define this class as @service. I've already explained to you. Service tells that this class is a Spring Bean of an IOC container. Next, I'll define private user details service. Okay. All right. And then I'll define logger private static final logger space logger equals. I'm basically implementing a logging class for this. Logger factory dot get logger dot class. Logger are all part of SL4J factory. Okay. But find logged in username. Let me define @auto implement the dependencies. Here, this method I'm not using anywhere. However, I'm defining it for your reference. Security context and dot sorry, it should be context holder dot get context dot get authentication dot get details. This I can store it in object user details. Okay. Okay, this method I'm writing only for your reference. You can as well avoid this. This I'll be using if my front end is a JSP and I want to know the login username. Next, coming to auto login, here I'll make use of user detail service dot load by username. I'll pass this. Okay, this returns an object of type user details. Okay, now I'll make use of username password authentication token equals new authentication token, to which I pass user details, comma, password, comma, user details dot get authorities. All right, then using authentication manager dot authenticate, I'll pass this password name authentication token. All right, now if this is authenticated, then I'll make use of this authentication dot set authentication sorry, it should be this one. Okay, that's it. What is the issue here? It should be password. Okay, so here I've defined a auto login wherein by making use of authentication manager and authentication user password authentication token, I'm checking if the user or password that is entered is authenticated or not. Okay, so that's it. That's it in this demo, wherein I've defined the service classes to check if the user name and password is authenticated or not. First defined a user detail service implementation which implements user detail service, and I've implemented the method load by username. Then I've defined a class called user service implementation wherein I've defined two methods to find the user and to save the user. This save is redundant. I mean, we don't need this for this particular demo. However, I've shown in case you're using it anyway, you can make use of this method to save the user. This is only for reference. Then I've implemented a class called security service implementation, which checks if the user and the password is authenticated or not. In my next demo, I will show the class implementing or the extending web security configure adapter and the end-to-end demo. Thank you.